Welcome to the podcast, Speaking to Influence, Communication Secrets of the C-Suite. I'm Dr. Laura Sokola, your host, founder of Vocal Impact Productions, and author of Speaking to Influence, Mastering Your Leadership Voice. My guest today is David Reale, CEO of the Phoenix Tube Company. Now, tube companies, okay, when you think of steel tubes, you're going, wait, there's actually people who do that. And yes, as a matter of fact, that would be David. And where do we see these? I guarantee if you have, well, I shouldn't guarantee, but I'd be willing to make a really strong bet that if you've ever ridden a bus, if you've ridden a subway, when you're getting on, you're standing up, getting ready to get on or off the car, you're holding on to that rod, whether it's vertical, horizontal, so that when the bus or the train hits the brakes, you don't go flying through the front windshield. That's something that David produced. So you have been officially part of the Phoenix Tube Company. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Laura. I appreciate it.
It's funny, David and I think David officially, you hold the record for the Speaking to Influence guest that I have known the longest. David and I went to high school together, and it has been, well, I'm not going to say how many years, but it has been at least a couple of decades since we last had a chance to speak. And then we just got together, reconnected at a reunion, which he hosted. Amazing. And as we were talking, I thought he was telling me about his company, about Phoenix Tube. And I thought to myself, I can honestly say I have not had the steel tube industry represented on Speaking to Influence. So let's see where this goes. And I'm so grateful to you for coming and joining me today.
I'm looking forward to having a wonderful conversation with you and catching up after a couple of years.
A couple of years, just a couple of years. Yeah, we're going to go with that. Right. That's my story. I'm sticking with it. It's my show.
Perfect.
I get to make the rules. I'm glad you're on board with it. So David, tell us a little bit more about Phoenix Tube Company. What's your 30-second elevator pitch?
So Phoenix Tube was started in 1980 by my father and another gentleman. And we manufacture ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. We manufacture 304 and 316 series stainless. And we provide tubing to the entire North America. And anywhere else, anybody else wants it, we'll make it for you.
That's me. And if I'm not mistaken, you said you are the only North American manufacturer of this. Everybody else is in China or otherwise overseas, right?
That is correct. In our niche, yes.
In the niche. Okay.
Exactly.
So remember, next time you are on a bus or on a subway or something that you can say, thank you, David, when you're there and safe. Terrific. Now, in doing this, I mean, I don't know that any kid grows up and thinks to themselves arbitrarily, I think I'm going to steel tubing. So you're there. This is part of your family business. What's your favorite part of your job and why?
The favorite part of my job is, I grew up in this industry and I started at a very young age. And I really, truly love being a leader and a boss of 130 employees. I feel that it's not that you're just a boss or a certain type of boss, but you have to be a boss to every different personality that you have on the shop floor or in the office. And our diversity is extreme. We have probably 5, 6, 7 different countries represented outside, Eastern European, Latin American, and you have to be a different boss to different people. And I think that's something that I truly love. Sometimes you need a little honey with the way you lead. Sure. Sometimes you have to have a little vinegar. Yep. It's you have to kind of know your audience, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So that's what I really truly love.
Yes. Now, tell me about what's going on in the company and how do you have to adjust your messaging to different stakeholders? Because obviously you've got your factory guys, you've got your clients, you've got your, you've got your other leaders and investors. What's really important right now and how do you adapt your messaging accordingly?
So as the world knows, we just got out of not out of a pandemic, but I feel
hopefully
we're kind of on the back end of what's going on
light at the end
here.
Of the tunnel. Yes,
of course. And over the course of 2 years, we had to cut hours, and that's kind of tough to do for guys that have been used to working 12-hour shifts 4 days a week, and then even working on Fridays as well. And to keep the morale up, you know, there's a certain uh, there's a certain thing you have to do, and just to keep them positive on an everyday basis, especially when they're only working 20 hours some weeks, 25 hours some weeks. That's
Due
something,
to
that's a
temporary
message.
cutbacks because of the pandemic.
Exactly. And that kind of, that makes people think, oh, what's going to happen next, and are we ever going to come out of this? And luckily, we probably had about a 4-month blip, and then we got the guys back out on a regular basis. And that's that kind of kept morale up after the 4 months, which was kind of nice. But as far as it's only Andrew and I, as far as shareholders here, and
Mm.
we just kept everything positive. And in the office, we kept the skeleton crew to make sure everybody was comfortable. That's been very big over the last couple of years. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the things we've done. Um,
I would think that as a family-run business, as this is the second generation running it, but that
mhm.
if you've had people working for you for the duration of those last 4 decades or so,
Uh-huh.
that it is
Absolutely.
something of an internal family among themselves.
It's absolutely. And outside and inside, we have fathers, sons, uncles, cousins working for us outside, and it's truly a family atmosphere, and we like to keep it that way. It
Yes,
works for us.
there's
You
kind
know,
of a we're all in this together feeling.
absolutely. We're all rowing in the right direction.
It all helps if
Yeah.
you're rolling in the right direction, or at least all in the same direction one way or another. Let's say if it's the wrong
Exactly.
direction, you figure it out and you redirect. So,
For sure.
so with regard to communication, then running this
Mhm.
company, what's something you're really good at, and what's something that where you wish you were better at it, communication wise?
I truly feel I'm a great leader, a very good motivator to the different diversity that we have outside and inside. We have all different walks of life, and I feel that when you could get them to work for you, uh, and be personable, it's a better environment. And I like to really, I like patting people on the back on a daily basis. I always make sure that I go to every workstation in the morning, say good morning, how are you doing? And it's very personable. And I do that throughout the factory as well. I go to stop at every machine. I make sure everyone's doing well. And if there's ever a problem, I always have an open door for everybody in the entire factory. And everybody knows that.
It sounds like you have an actual personal connection with everybody who's there, regardless of their role.
Absolutely. And that's from starting at 14 years old on the shop floor. My father made us go on the shop floor and do the jobs that these guys do. And you know that what they're doing on a daily basis is not easy. And they work 12-hour shifts. And let's, after 10 hours, they're licked, and it's hot out there in the summer, and it's cold out there in the winter. And you feel their pain, and you just want to make sure that or that they know that they could come talk to you whenever they want, and they know it's a family atmosphere, and that's really it's very important to us.
So it sounds like empathy is big, and you need them to know that you understand. And it's not just that sort of a figurative, I feel your pain kind of a thing.
No,
It's really like, literally, you've been in that
I
job. You've
know
been in
your
there
pain.
in the heat of the summer, in the cold of the winter. You were literally there doing those jobs back from the time that you were in high school.
100%. And we still have the same guys that I've worked with when I was 17 years old out there. Guys have worked with us for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
It's very special.
Yeah. Be careful with those numbers of decades. You're going to give me away. I'm not ready to be thrown under the bus quite yet.
Sorry.
So, where aside from not being subtle in the key areas that were most important in this conversation, what is another skill in communication that you'd like to be better at?
Better at? Well, I mean, there's a lot, of course. One thing I'd like to be better at is maybe get my point across a little bit better sometimes. Sometimes I have a tendency to bark. It's part of my Italian heritage, I
Yeah.
guess. I really feel that sometimes I have to dial it back and not get so emotional. I do take a lot of things very personable, And that's something I feel I could dial it back every once in a while. And I have to say, my brother is the complete opposite. So he
Mm,
talks me off the ledge every once in a while, so to speak. And
got
that's one reason why we work so well together.
nice. And so can you play the good cop, bad cop dynamic every now and then? Like, you go handle this.
We do. Unfortunately, I'm usually the bad cop, and he's always the good cop. So, but
Well,
that's okay.
the
I
door
know my role.
kickers, the door kickers got to go in and do their job, and then somebody else is going to come in and hand out the chocolate bars afterwards and
That's
clean
for
stuff
sure.
up. Nice, make
But
nice.
it works well. It works well.
It's good to know your role. That's really important.
Yep.
So, what about role models? Is there who's somebody with regard to communication? Who do you view as somebody who's a really effective, inspiring speaker?
So I would have to say my father.
Hmm.
He had a way of, if you well, obviously you've never met my father, but he had a way of telling you the way it was, and he never sugarcoated anything. So if you were wrong, he would tell you you're wrong. If he felt like you weren't doing a good job, he would tell you. And that's a very, for me, that works well. I'm a doer, so if I'm doing something or was doing something out in the factory and he felt like I wasn't putting my best foot forward, he would tell me. And that's something that I kind of really took to heart and always wanted to make sure that I was making him proud. And that's kind of he was the best role model there was. And I have to say, towards the end of his life, unfortunately, he had Parkinson's,
Hmm.
and we would he got into a car accident about, I'd say, 6 or 7 years before he passed, and it was a blessing in disguise for me because he decided he wasn't going to drive anymore.
Hmm.
And he told us, he says, all right, David and Andrew, you guys are picking me up to go to work from now on.
Yeah.
And work was an hour away. So I got an hour of, 3 days a week talking to my father, and he would give us his, 40 years of wisdom every car ride. And it was something that really just, I'll never forget the conversations that we had, what we did right, what we're doing wrong, where we should go in the business. And, those were very special times for both of us, for Andrew and I. And
Yeah.
yeah,
To be able to
yeah,
have that one-on-one time with your father. Those are the things that you don't necessarily
incredible.
appreciate when you're a teenager, but you certainly do appreciate it later in life.
100%,
What did he
100%.
do, if I can poke a little bit there? Because to the extent that we all want to know what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, we want to be clear on, okay, if this isn't good, how do I fix it, et cetera. Did you have to just toughen your skin, or did he have a way of delivering it that made you appreciate and understand it without feeling criticized? There's a difference between being corrected and being criticized. Was it something where he was always good at walking that line, or did you resist or resent as a kid and have learned to interpret it better as an adult, or
Mhm.
where was that?
So he was very strong-minded, and he would always he would always tell us the way it is. And I'll give you an example. Like I I got out of sales, and I was in my brother's office, and a couple of days before, he says, you're going to start working in the factory with the plant manager, and you got to learn the factory. And I'm sitting there at 6:45 or 7:45 having my coffee, and he walks in and, yeah, so what's going on in the factory? And I said, I don't know. I'm having my coffee and I'm going to go out in 10 minutes. And he blew a gasket. We
Mm,
could be making, what did he say? We could be making broomsticks out there for all you know. And I remember that him saying that to me. I was like, he's right. He's like, you need to know your business. And he had a way of saying things by not saying them. And I really, from that day forward, I said, you know what? I need to know my business from front to end. And from that day forward, I could tell you everything that's going on in that factory every day of the week.
so what did you learn from him, both with regard to, okay, we need to be clear, we need to give people important information.
Mhm.
It sounds like there's some pieces in there about how to do it and how not to do it. If you could have changed some, what would have made it easier to take in, or what do you think will what has helped you be a better leader, both by doing exactly what he did and by adapting a bit?
I I think by him being so strong-willed, I think that made me definitely a better leader and a better communicator, because I took what he would do and I would kind of make it my own. And I think that, the best leaders come out of that, where you take something from a great leader and you kind of make it your own, and be the boss you're supposed to be, not
Mhm.
the way you were taught, I guess.
Not just a clone.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
And what did you have to do to tweak that and make it more you and less him?
Um, well, he definitely did not sugarcoat any words. He wouldn't get away with some of the things he did or said in today's
Nowadays?
environment. You
Sure.
know what I mean? So I know, HR would not have been happy with
Dip-
some of his tactics, but
Diplomacy was not one of his greater God-given strengths, it sounds
no
like.
way, no
Got it.
way. But he got his point across, and everybody knew my father. If you were loyal to him, he was loyal to you. And obviously, with the guys working for him for 30 plus years, you could see that they loved him. They really did. Um, what did I take from him that would make me a better leader? Um,
Well, it sounds like being
he
direct and not just being clear with people is something that you took from him quite directly,
Absolutely.
frankly.
And like I said before, sprinkling a little honey on things every once in a while goes a long way with a lot of people. And I think that's how I kind of made it my own.
Sure. And you don't need to be on
Mhm.
eggshells necessarily. I mean, diplomacy is I mean, there's so many different definitions, but things like diplomacy is the art of letting others have your way, right? Or the
Right.
tact is the art of being able to make a point without making an enemy. So it
Uh-huh.
sounds like it's not about eggshells or super sugarcoating, but
Mhm.
softening the edge a little bit, not necessarily delivering with a sledgehammer, a little teaspoon of sugar here and there. It's not, or honey, as you said, it
Yep.
doesn't necessarily have to water down the message, just doesn't need to hurt
Right.
all the time
No,
either. So
it
nice.
doesn't. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
diplomacy is definitely a good place. Of course, you could be more of the Winston Churchill school of thought, which I believe he was the one who said, diplomacy is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip.
Yeah.
So we all have our role models one way or another, right?
Right.
All right. So now what about style shifting? Because there's so many different people that you have to connect with, from your partners and your vendors to your employees and others, your internal partners, external partners. How do you have to shift your speech style sometimes from to be able
Oh,
to talk to them in
that's great.
different ways and be yourself still, but recognize that your
Sure.
delivery needs to change a little?
So we deal with different types of people that come into our factory. Let's just take, for example, tours. So I give a lot of
Interesting.
tours in the factory, and sometimes you'll have a guy who's actually bending the material and working with his hands. He'll be wearing his work boots. And then you'll have a guy who is the vice president of sales. And then you'll have a guy who's actually the owner of a steel company, $1 billion corporation. So you kind of
These are
have
people
to
on the tour, or these are people who are part
on
of your, okay,
they're on the tour, yeah. So
they're
you have
tourists.
to, yeah, you have to adjust the way you speak to each individual as they come. And different, like the guy with the boots, he speaks the lingo. He's going to want to get onto the mills and onto the floor and actually see how everything is made. Or the guy, on the in the mid-level there, a mid-level management, doesn't really care about that much so much, but he wants to know how fast you can make it, how efficiently you can make it, and when could I get my material. Where the guy in the top, they want the broad picture, they want the big picture, and they're not very interested in how the material is made so much, but the big picture. And you have to change your communication to each one of them, and talk the lingo with the guy with the boots, and then speak a little be a little bit more of an intellect with the CEO of North American Stainless, for example.
Right, right.
Mhm.
It's so funny that you said tour, and my brain went right into travel and tours, and I'm going,
Oh no.
it would never have occurred. Like, okay, you can go to Disney, or you could go
No.
visit this. Here I'm in
Yeah.
Philadelphia. Come visit the Liberty
No.
Bell, the Constitution Center, the Art Museum. It would never
Yeah.
occur to me to detour to Bethlehem and tour the steel factory. Sure, why not? Let's see how steel
It's
tubes are
very
made.
interesting though. It's
I have no doubt. It's just, but
yeah.
so when you're talking about, just for everybody else's clarification, who
Mhm.
tours the factory? What does that mean to go on a tour?
Okay, so on a tour, so if you're using stainless steel tubing and you're curious on how it's made, and
Who's
you'll
using
come visit
stainless
the
steel tubing?
factory.
Because I don't tend to go to Home Depot to buy stainless steel tubing.
So we sell to distribution house and 95%. So the 5% end users that we have, we kind of know where that goes. But as far as 95% of our material, it's just out in the market, and it goes to fabricators, and they'll bend it and make whatever they have to make out of it. So
Got it. So
yeah.
it's otherwise it sounds like it's mostly clients or prospective clients that you would be selling it to. That's
so
those
it's
are
a
people who are coming
distribution
through.
house.
Okay.
Distributor will grab their fabricator, and they'll say, "Oh, let's go to the mill and take a tour and see exactly how
Got
the
it.
tubing is made." And they'll usually have questions, can I bend this tubing? Is it okay to cut this tubing, and stuff like that?
So it's business partners. It's not tourists per se
No,
on
no,
the
no,
tour.
no, 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 no,
Got it. I just want to make that very clear in case anybody's going, that's
Yep.
kind of curious. I think I'll take my kid out.
Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
tours. Can I buy a ticket at 2:00 on Saturday? We'll go after
Right.
soccer
I
practice.
think
Something a
fast
little
pass.
different. Exactly. Fast pass this too. I like
Yeah.
that. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Remember, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. So, David, this brings us to our listener 24-hour influence challenge. And this is your opportunity to talk directly to the audience and challenge them to take just one step, something they can finish within 24 hours by this time tomorrow in order to have more influence for themselves. How would you like to challenge our listeners today?
I will challenge your younger audience, your couple years into the business, salespeople. When you're in a meeting, you're there for a reason. And what I mean is that you're not there to head nod. Your boss wants you there for a reason. He wants your fresh ideas. So when you're in a meeting, speak up, even if you don't think it's a good idea, because I don't want to say a bad idea, but an idea that's not quite what they're looking for. You could always take a little piece of that idea, and a little piece of that idea in our business could mean minutes on changeovers or a little faster production. And those minutes and those hours add up in the grand scheme of things around here, at least.
Mm.
And I say, I challenge you to speak up, and don't be afraid. I know as a young executive, I would head nod a lot. And that's something that I look back on and I say, you know what, I should have said this, or I should have said that. And I not that I regret it, but I feel like I should have spoken up a little bit more in those early years, because they're fresh ideas. They're right out of the can. And that's what your boss wants. They want those fresh ideas.
And it's not necessarily that it has to be completely half-baked either way, but you also don't have to, for those of you who are overthinkers out there who more often than not will go, nah, this might not work, so I shouldn't. That we don't need to be that hyper conservative in things. Try it, put ideas out there. Right. You can preface and say, this is not completely formulated, but I'm thinking that there's something in this area, give the piece, what's formulating in your mind, what's something that's being overlooked that you feel like should be incorporated somehow, or what's a different angle, a factor that maybe people haven't had a chance to look at how to integrate. You never know, throw a piece. You don't have to have the end all be all answer, but add a piece to the puzzle.
For sure. I can't agree more. It's those little things add up to big ideas. They really do.
Right. It's all about being a contributor, right? Being a part of the team, not just being the solutions guy or woman or whoever it is. So I love that.
Exactly.
Speak up. That being said, for those of you out there who are like, I do that all the time. Okay, so then maybe take a step back and let somebody else have their moment. And if there's plenty of us on that end of the spectrum as well. So, but great opportunity, everybody. Don't hold back. Share your ideas, even if they're not perfect. You're not paid for perfection. So then what about mistakes? We were just talking about the fear of making mistakes as a reason why somebody might hold back, might not contribute, fear of being imperfect, et cetera. What's a communication related mistake you made at some point?
Well, of course we make a lot of mistakes, but the one big mistake I think that I've, as a young kid in the business and working a lot of hours, you're working with people that are mentoring you, and they're trying to teach you the way. And I remember I was probably 16, 17 years old, and Henry, which I think he was our second employee here, worked here until he retired. And it's August, it's 100 degrees out, and he's telling me how to do something. He's, I'm cleaning the rolls. It's like, no, you need to do it this way. You need to do it this way. And I'm like, Henry, after 20 minutes, I said, Henry, I'm going to be your boss one day. Stop it, knock it off, please. And as soon as I said that, when you want to just take those words and just stick them back in your mouth and
Yes.
hope he didn't hear.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, that didn't go well. That's not the way I wanted to say that.
Yes.
I should have said it this way. And those are some things when you say words, my father always used to say that, choose your words wisely, because, they're always out there. Once they're said, they're said.
Yeah.
And that's something that I regret. I do. And I've got to say that when he retired, in his retirement speech,
how many years later?
He said, he said that in his retirement speech, that David said I was going to be his boss one day. And that kind of threw me back. And I was like, oh, so Henry, if you're listening, I do apologize for saying that. So
it is funny. We all have those moments where you hear those words come out of your own mouth, and part of you goes, that sounded different in my head. And the other part of you goes, no.
Exactly.
It's like slow motion. You wish you could just reel it back in, and you just know you're just doomed. It's way too late. But
absolutely,
I want to give credit to be able to just look out there and say, hey, Henry, if you're out there, I apologize. I think a lot of leaders sometimes get stuck on the inability to acknowledge mistake or to apologize or to whatever else. There's a fear of, well, that'll show me as being weak and I can't admit there's a mistake or something. And I think it's really important. And I was just talking to a group earlier this morning about it, that there's a difference between humiliation and humility. And humility, to the best definition I ever heard of it, was actually from a friend of mine who's a priest. And he said, humiliation strips away dignity, but humility restores it. And I think that's so powerful, the notion of, to have the humility to own your mistake and to say, I should not have said that. That was rude. That was whatever. I apologize. It was inappropriate of me. That doesn't make you look weaker. That actually strengthens you as someone who's mature enough to own that kind of thing and to give credit to the person who does it.
Can't agree more.
It's hard for a lot of people. It's hard for me. Look, we all have egos. Egos light the way all too frequently, or maybe just dim the lights along the way. And that's part of the problem. We end up stumbling all over ourselves. But I think that's a great story. And I hope, Henry, you're out there listening and you appreciate that he's outed himself in front of the world for you. That's but great example. Now, within the conversations of those difficult discussions, what's a time when you had to share some bad news or initiate a difficult conversation, and how did you handle it? Because nobody likes those moments, even when you are the bad cop.
Yeah, there's a lot of difficult conversations that you have in business, especially being, for 25 years I'm here now. But one of the most difficult conversations you'll have with an employee is when they think they deserve a promotion, but you don't think they deserve a promotion or a raise. And you're trying to tell them that, you want to keep morale up, but you still have to say, listen, you're not doing your job up to the standard that I would do, or that your peers think you should be doing. And it's a very fine line to make sure that they understand that they're still wanted and they're still a very valuable employee, but there's room to be better. Yeah. And some people they get very hurt, and some people look for another job, or they come to work and they're not happy, and you got to try to build them up and make sure you're still trying to motivate them to be better people and better employees. And those are very difficult conversations.
I would imagine nobody wants to say no, and nobody wants to hear no, for sure, especially when it comes to those kinds of opportunities.
And when they think they deserve the promotion and they think they're working hard, that's, it's kind of a knock on them. So.
Yeah, well, sure. And what does it mean to work hard, right? Does it mean the number of hours you put in? Does it mean the quantity of work that you're producing in that time? Does it mean the quality of the work and how accurate it is versus, rate of error, how much scrap you produce, et cetera. So I would imagine there's a lot of different factors, that it's not just a subjective decision. So have you gotten better at those conversations over the years?
Absolutely. You learn. You also learn the different personalities that you're dealing with as well, which helps. And being here so long, and you understand how to to talk to certain people and how to get the most out of certain people as well. But everybody really knows the standard that I like, and I work the job, so I understand how to do the job and to do the job correctly. So they can't fool me,
Right.
and that's something that I take a lot of pride in. So
So give me an example. Walk me through a day, just a snippet of a conversation where 10 or 20 years ago, having that conversation to let somebody know they've asked for this raise, they've asked for the promotion, and you just weren't able to give it to them for whatever reason. You didn't feel like they'd earned it yet. What's a line or two of what that would have sounded like 10 or 20 years ago that's different from
when I
how it would
wasn't
sound
polished,
today? Yes, sure. Let's put it that way. So
I would say, forget it. Get back to work. This is crazy. You're not doing the job that I think you should be doing, and that's it. There's nothing to talk about.
did you like hear
And
yourself say that and then turn around and go, Dad, is that you?
yeah,
Dad?
exactly.
And what about now?
Now, I would definitely, I would massage it a little bit more. I'd say, there's room to improve. You're doing a great job. I see how hard you're working, and I think we need to start doing this, or I think we need to start doing that before we could start talking about this. And that's how I approach the guys outside. And you have to massage it. You definitely have to massage it a little bit.
So it sounds like the no has turned into a not yet, but here's what would be required to get the yes.
It's 100%, 100%.
So a little more context, and there's a carrot out there. It's still possible. It's just not ready at this point.
Absolutely.
Very different message. Very different message.
Mhm.
Now, what about with regard to when you're trying to think about promotion and trying to think about succession planning and things, you're in a different situation given that it's a family-run operation,
Yes.
but you, of course, also have other people working who are not part of the genetic family of sorts. What does it take to ensure that when you're promoting, that the person is ready for leadership, not just that they're experienced?
So we like to hire within, and that's something that we've done for many years around here. So that gives people motivation around here. They know that there is a job at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
And we look at people and say, are you motivated? Will you stay the extra hour? Will you do jobs that you're not really hired for? And when we see that, that's when we say, okay, this guy can be a leader. This guy can work for us, because that's what we expect. As far as a succession, and obviously I have 2 boys. I have a daughter. If she wants to come into the steel business, that's great. My brother has 2 boys and a daughter as well. So we have 6 children that potentially could be in the steel business here. The succession plan is kind of difficult because we're not IBM. We're not that big, where when Andrew and I came in, we had jobs to start, but we knew we would be bosses at some point.
Sure.
Where our children, when they come in, they're going to have to first, they have to learn the business, but then they're going to have to take on roles, and they're going to have to take on jobs like be an engineer or be the head sales guy. So it's just definitely a different succession plan than when we were here, 20 years ago, or
Sure.
a couple years ago, as we talked about before.
Of course.
So
I'll delete that part. I'll blip that out.
Yeah. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. And there's a lot of challenges with kids today compared to when we grew up. Kids today, you're battling technology. The kids are on the texting compared to, hello, Mrs. Casal, how are you? Is Kenny available? Like, those are skills that we developed as very young, and these kids don't have that. Hello, how are you? It's just a text and come outside.
Conversational ability.
It's very different. And my kids, unfortunately, they play sports, so they haven't been able to come here at 14, 15, 16 years old. Sports nowadays are all year round. And if you're not doing the involuntary workouts, during the summer, you're not going to see the field. So unfortunately, they're going to start working on the factory floor at 21, 22, 23, 24 years old. And they're going to get dirty, and they're going to wear the work boots just like we did. That's the
Sure.
only way to work. That's the only way to learn it from the ground up.
So I just to qualify, it's not that it's unfortunate that they play soccer. It's this with
Yeah.
regard to industry experience. We all love soccer. We're not bad
Yeah.
mouthing any of those kinds of things. My kids play soccer, but it's more that everything's got a pro and a con, right? The easy
Correct.
and the hard. And as a kid, I'm sure there were plenty of times when you wish you were playing soccer, but dad said, no,
For sure.
you're 14, you're 15. It's
Yeah.
time, go to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what we do. This is the family business. You're going to come in. Now you can appreciate what you got out of that and what you
Yeah.
had to sacrifice in the process, summers down the shore or whatever it was.
Mhm.
But now the kids had all those opportunities that you may have wished that you had, but now recognizing there's a trade-off that they're going to finish college without the better part of a decade worth of industry experience and hands-on experience. And they'll have their
Yeah.
books and they'll have some knowledge of it, but they're going to
Exactly.
be starting a lot further behind should they decide to enter the business.
Absolutely.
So,
And they're going to have to gain the respect of the guys on the shop by doing the job of the guys on the shop. And we
yes.
have a saying around here, you can't fool me. And that's
Mm,
something that, all of upper management around here have really started from the ground up. And when we walk through the factory, you can't fool me. I know that machine could run at 60 inches a minute. Why is it running at 50 inches a minute? And those are
right.
the things you question when you're walking around the factory.
Yes. Yes. So
Mhm.
all that credibility markers, right? Because they know you've been here. They know that
Absolutely.
it's a different world.
Mhm.
Finally, speaking of kids, let's
Yeah.
talk about the next generation. If you had the opportunity, David, if you were invited to give the commencement address at a high school graduation ceremony, what advice would you give the graduates, whether or not they're going to go to college, enter a
Okay.
factory of some sort or other, or
Mhm.
anything else? What's the one piece of advice you would give them for them to be successful?
The one piece of advice I would give them is love what you do. You have to love what you do. If you don't, you're going to work. And we all know the saying, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that it's so true. It rings true every day. And I love what I do. I truly do.
I can tell, and that's great. And we
Mhm.
appreciate it because those of us who
Yeah.
ride subways and buses on a very regular
Yeah.
basis, pandemic or otherwise, are extremely glad that
Yeah.
those bars
Yeah.
are there. So with that,
Absolutely.
David, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a really fun jog down memory lane and elsewhere for that matter.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had a great time catching up and I appreciate everything.
So, and everybody else out there, as always, thank you for listening in. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you have not done so yet, please go to iTunes and anywhere else and give us a 5-star rating so that we can help even more people increase their confidence, presence, and influence. Oh, David, I forgot to ask, how can people learn
Sure.
more about you and the Phoenix Tube Company? Where can they go?
We have a website, phoenixtube.com. Just check us out.
Great. Phoenixtube.com. Of course, we'll put that in the show notes. So check those out as well. And to everybody else, finally, if you want to, last opportunity, if you want to download my free guide to equipment recommendations for virtual influence, including my picks for microphones, lights, and more, go to speakingtoinfluence.com. I'm Dr. Laura Sokola, and you're listening to Speaking to Influence, Communication Secrets of the C-Suite.